Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we'll look at the Baldwin Hutchins texts and ask the question, who's playing who? Now, if you remember the backstory to Alec Baldwin's phone, Baldwin said he was cooperating with the investigation, and that was despite the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office saying that they sought Baldwin's phone for weeks and then eventually months. Baldwin finally handed over his phone on January 15th this year. Remember, the incident took place on October 21st last year, and so he actually only handed his phone over around about 3 months after the incident. So it's quite interesting and also quite ironic that Baldwin is thus far the only one to provide text messages in an attempt to exonerate himself. The question is, does he succeed? In Baldwin's 37-page indemnification complaint, also referred to as an arbitration demand in the media, it really is just a legal filing that reads like an affidavit. In the filing, we see email correspondence to and from Baldwin during the pre-production phase. I think what's pertinent from a legal perspective is that although an email correspondence narrative is volunteered, it seems to terminate prior to actual production. It terminates around the time that you really want to know what is going on, what is being said, what is reported, what is the feeling about what is going on as well. And so one does have to wonder about emails sent during the production phase, including the email from Lane Looper closer to the incident. We must also look critically at the text messages, not only examining what's volunteered, but what's not, and which period of the timeline is covered by the volunteered texts and which is not. The legal filing also addresses snippets from the script, which we'll examine in more detail in subsequent analysis. Now, in terms of the Russ texts, on page 22, which is about halfway through the 37-page filing, there are almost 50 bullet points from bullet number 75 through to 117. They deal with Baldwin's communications with Hutchins' husband, but also Baldwin's attempts to craft a proposed settlement with Helena's husband. I think it's important to stress that Baldwin wasn't merely communicating with Matt Hutchins to commiserate and just out of compassion, but to some extent there was also communication, and perhaps even to a large extent, out of his own interest. It was to save his production. As we systematically go through the text provided in the filing, it's worth noting the date Baldwin provided his exclusive to ABC News. Remember, it was December the 3rd. And we need to think about that date, December 3rd, vis-a-vis the dates of the texts. So, for example, one would imagine Hutchins would have some response, he would have some reaction via text with Baldwin over the things Baldwin disclosed in public during that interview. This also includes statements he made directly to and via Hutchins himself. In other words, when he spoke about Hutchins during the interview and what he said about Helena, right, you would imagine that there would be some response, some reaction. Thank you for saying that. I can't believe you said that. I was not aware of this or whatever. And you would think that would lead to a burst of cell phone activity following that interview, right? Does that make sense? And so are we going to see that here? And once again, I also want you to pay special attention to the background notion that Baldwin didn't want to hand over his phone to the authorities for 3 months. You might not say he didn't want to, but just the fact that he didn't hand it over as we review the text systematically and chronologically. Worth playing for. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So now we are going directly to the legal filing. We are on page 22 of the document, and it deals with a subheading, Baldwin's communications with Hutchins' husband. And that's really Matt Hutchins. It's quite interesting that it doesn't just say Matthew Hutchins. Anyway, it says here, point number 75. In the days following the tragedy, Baldwin was in shock and anguish over the events and desperately wished to return home to his family. However, he remained in New Mexico to honor Hutchins at an impromptu memorial and to meet with her husband, Matthew Hutchins, and their son, Andros Hutchins, who traveled from California to Mexico shortly after her death. Now, what I find quite interesting with that is you have kind of a similar situation in the Amanda Knox case, for example, where something terrible happens. In that case, it's a homicide. And then there's this sort of sense of, I'm actually staying here because I really want to. I'm actually staying here because I want to help out with the investigation. I'm staying here because I want to cooperate in any way I can. But when you look at it in a kind of a different way, you sort of got to ask, if she this is Amanda Knox, if Amanda Knox wanted to leave, could she have? Remember, she was kind of a suspect in that case, and she was later charged in that case. So although it's conveyed in this way of, oh, I was staying there because I'm such a good person, I'm so cooperative, could you really have left if you really wanted to? And so one wonders to what extent that's applicable here. It might not be, but one also wonders, did the authorities want to speak to Baldwin again? Especially, since Helena died. I'm not quite sure if she died while Baldwin was talking to the police or after that. If she died afterwards, you can imagine them wanting to speak to him again. In any event, so he remains in New Mexico. To his credit, he attends this memorial service, which Amanda Knox didn't do when she was in Perugia. I'm just using these cases just to compare to one another. Now we go to bullet point number 76. The morning of October 22nd, that's the day after the tragedy, the day following Elena Hutchins' death, Baldwin contacted Matthew Hutchins via text message, reaching out to inquire if they may speak. So I think what's quite interesting here is that Baldwin actually makes contact with Matt first, right? And you're going to see a little bit of an inversion to that a little bit later on. So just bear in mind point number 76. Number 77, I'm not going to say Hutchins, I'm going to call him Matt. Matt responds, thanks for getting in touch. I think it would help if we can confront this crisis together. I am open to discussing. And then he said, please do call when you're ready. So think about, it's not just a crisis. There's the business, the production that has come to an end, but there's obviously also a legal aspect that has to be handled, right? So anyway, going on to page 23, Matt also let Baldwin know that he was receiving media inquiries seemingly seeking Baldwin's input on his response. Now bear in mind, Baldwin should be an old hat at this. Baldwin should be not a professional, but certainly somebody who knows how to deal with the media. So it kind of makes sense that Matt would say this. Anyway, it's interesting that they bring this up, that he's seeking Baldwin's input. And so you have this text message sent on Friday, October 22nd, first thing in the morning, from Matt Hutchins. And if you think about it, you heard from certain people. Did you hear from Matt Hutchins? I'm talking about in the days following this. There were a lot of newspaper reports. There was a lot of online content, and you heard from various people. In December, you heard from Baldwin himself. And, of course, Baldwin put a couple of things out on Instagram. But you ultimately never heard from Matt Hutchins. And just bear in mind that he was seeking Baldwin's input on how he should respond, right? And so this is the text message he sent. October 22nd, this is the morning after his wife's death. He writes, this is Matt. And immediately Baldwin responds, may I call you, or later if you prefer. And then Matt responds, thanks for getting in touch. I think it would help if we can confront this crisis together. I'm open to discussing. Please do call when you are ready. And then he says, I'm getting a lot of media requests, and here is how I'm responding for the time being. And so this is actually sent to Alec Baldwin around about 5 minutes after he's gotten another text from someone from CBS at 7:49 that morning. The text reads, "Hi Matthew, this is Lizzie Crowley from CBS National News. We just spoke briefly. I'm so sorry to be connecting with you over such devastating circumstances. I really do want you to know that if there's anything we can do for you at this time, we would love to offer you that support. Any memories you'd like to share of Alina or stories we would love to honor. Her legacy will live on in the way you and her loved ones remember her. Please take care and stay strong. Anything you may need, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sincerely, Lizzie." And then he responds, "Thank you. Please note that I will be preparing a statement. I won't be able to speak until I've done so," which is quite a kind of clipped, measured, legal response in a way, given the circumstances. So, point number 78 is Hutchins and Baldwin spoke by phone early in the day on October 22nd. After the conversation, Baldwin wrote by text message, and so that's just reviewing what we've already looked at. Then point number 79 on page 24 deals with, it says, Hutchins also asked Baldwin about the contact information for the Rust production office, writing that he was trying to make sure I only trust the right people outside of you and Joel. Now, what I find quite interesting with this is there's no response to this text. It sort of seems to be quoted out of context. Hutchins, Matt is approaching Alec and saying, "This is my response to the media. What do you think about that?" And Baldwin, I'm sure he did respond. How do you think he responded? Did you think he was going to say, "Yeah, if you feel like you want to talk to them, go for it"? Or do you think he was saying, "Please don't talk to the media, and certainly if you want to talk to them, let me know or run it by me"? But you can kind of imagine that, or maybe Alec Baldwin said to him, "First make a statement and we'll go through that together, and then you can speak to the media," or whatever. But there's no response to this from Alec Baldwin. And so you kind of get the sense it's quoted out of context, where it's just mentioned that Matt is asking Baldwin for his advice, but then you don't actually see his advice. Then it goes on to say here, unless it comes up later on, this is another text. It's sent to Matt Hutchins. Oh, maybe, sorry, maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe this was the response to it. To Matt Hutchins, and then he provides a couple of numbers: Chrissy, Ro, Jess, Emily, Gabby, Matt. He says, "This is the production office and Matt Del Piano. I don't know if I'm saying that right. They know to text if they need you and have your contact in case you need us." And then he says, "Trying to make sure I only trust the right people outside of you and Joel. Thanks." Now, I don't know whether those texts go together. I don't know whether, his response to "should I talk to the media" is giving the production office. If you look at the context of the filing, it sort of jumps from, asking. Point 77 is about letting Baldwin know that he was receiving media inquiries. And then the next point really is that Baldwin responding to another request, which we don't see, about contact information, that he only trusts the right people. That is a separate thing, but if you conflate the two, it's almost like he says, should I speak to the media? And then you almost have this perception that the response is, okay, you should trust these people. But I'm not sure if that is the response to it. Does that make sense? It seems like these have been possibly quoted out of context. These seem to be separate questions. Then point number 80. Later that day, Baldwin arranged hotel accommodation for Hutchins and his son. Now, it seems like it's showing the beneficence and the generosity of Alec Baldwin, that he gets a hotel room for Matt. And if in the context of the whole debacle around the Rust thing, remember it was all about not getting hotel accommodation in certain places for certain staff who asked for it. Here he's actually volunteering to do that. Just bear that in mind. And this was on Friday, October 2nd, text sent from, I think, Alec Baldwin at 4:36 p.m. He said, "I got you a hotel room here at the Posada, even if only just for the night." And that brings us to point 81. The following day, October 23rd, Baldwin met with Matt and his son, and I think they had breakfast. At this meeting, Matt hugged Baldwin and told him, "I guess we're going to go through this together." So, yeah, it's quite interesting the way that this is written. Matt hugs Baldwin, Baldwin doesn't hug him. And if you think about it, who lost somebody? Who should actually be hugged in the situation? But the narrative is sort of written in a way that it seems like Hutchins is almost sycophantic or leeching or whatever, just in the way that it's written. Anyway, he says, "I guess we're going to go through this together." They don't actually put Baldwin's response here, which he actually gave on ABC News, where he said, "We're going to go through this together. Well, I'm not going to go through this as much as you are," which I've personally found that a bit of a cold response, a bit of a cynical response. Anyway, point 82, that day, Baldwin also attended and spoke at a memorial service for Alina that was organized by the crew of Rust. 83, Baldwin then flew home to be with his family. So he wasn't there for a terribly long time. He was there the 22nd, 23rd, and then he wasn't there anymore. And then we didn't really hear much from him until the 3rd. Then point number 84, Baldwin and Hutchins continued to communicate in text messages and phone calls throughout the month of October 2021, each inquiring as to how the other was doing. Now, obviously, we don't know what was said during these phone calls, but one can imagine that probably some of the content of the text messages were reflected and kind of mirrored in the content of the phone calls. Not precisely, but generally. Point number 85. On October 24th, Baldwin wrote to Hutchins, "I'd love an update on your son." This is Sunday, October 24th at 5:51 a.m. Now, what's quite interesting, if you think about this in a global way, this is a situation where a man shoots or is holding the gun when the gun goes off, but basically is directly involved, is the most directly involved in terms of where he's standing and everything that happens. And there's another man who has lost his wife as a result of this incident. And what is going on is they are asking one another how they are doing and whatever. But the bottom line is, you if you think about it, you would imagine that there would be animus, that there would be feelings of indignation, feelings of insecurity, feelings of anxiety, but above all, feelings of grief and even anger. And you kind of would want to know, can you tell me what happened? And I don't see that in this statement so far. I don't really see Baldwin saying to Matt, this is what happened. Whether he took him step by step through the details. Maybe he said, it's an accident, and shrugged or something like that. But you can imagine, I know, a very close friend of mine who got killed in a accident. He was riding his bike and he got run over. And I still want to know exactly what happened. I still don't know exactly what happened, and hopefully that'll come out at trial. But so when you know someone very well, when you care about someone and something changes their lives permanently, you do want to know the details. And so one wonders, did Matt ask for the details? How many details did Baldwin give him? That doesn't seem to be mentioned in here. That doesn't mean it wasn't mentioned, but you'd think if there was a discussion about that, what did they talk about over breakfast? what did they talk about? Anyway, point number 86. So instead what we're getting is sort of neutral banter about how are you, and kind of almost a positive but very superficial relationship with one another, just saying, how are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I wish you the best with your family, etc. It really seems just to be showing that there is no animus, I guess. But it seems a bit unrealistic, and it also seems to be a bit of a wishy-washy way of sort of dealing with the matter at hand, these non-confrontational messages. I mean, if anything, you would expect there to be some messages saying, okay, but why didn't you say this, or why didn't you do that, or what actually happened, or whatever. Why is that not part of the text? Point 86, Matt responds, among other messages, that his son enjoyed breakfast yesterday, and that I think we will find sensible ways to meet again when the time is right. But then he also told Baldwin, for now, just please focus on your family. He says, I am sure they are cherishing that you are home. So in a weird way, this is actually where Matt seems to be saying, almost putting up a bit of a boundary, saying, please just focus on your family now, right? Now we go to page 26, point number 87. On October 27, Baldwin wrote to Matt, I'm thinking of you and Andros. I hope you have a safe flight home. He also said, my wife sends her concern to you as well. So all of it is very sort of civil. It's very courteous. It's very polite. It's very sort of gentlemanly. You could even say it's quite chivalrous, right? But is it really? Is this actually about one is playing the other? Bear in mind, one of these people is a lawyer, right? Is that what's going on? And so number 88, Hutchins responds with a picture of his son saying, please share with her, I guess meaning with Baldwin's wife. Then 89, on October 29, Baldwin wrote to Matt, did you make it home? Matt responded, yes, how are you doing? I'm available if you want to chat. That was sent on Friday, October 29 at 11:40 p.m. That's quite late, right? Now we go to page 27. I'm not sure what the response was to that. I guess maybe there was a phone call. Who knows? Now we go to point 90. From the start of their communications, Baldwin repeatedly told Matt that he understood if Matt could not speak with him on the advice of his lawyers or due to any pending litigation. But Matt continuously assured Baldwin that he wished to keep in touch and maintain their relationship, which had become positive and mutually supportive. This seems to be really what they're trying to emphasize, is that, wow, 1 minute they have a positive and mutually supportive relationship, and then what happens? But the other side to it is it a genuine relationship? One could argue from one person's side, and one could argue, is it a genuine relationship from both sides? And one could also argue, if you were in that situation where someone had shot someone very close to you, right, or someone was involved in somehow directly or indirectly or whatever, in the death of somebody very close to you, do you think you would be positive and supportive? Do you think you'd be positive and mutually supportive? In terms of this friend of mine that was run over, I haven't spoken to the person involved, but I can't say I have very positive feelings towards that person. Even if he's potentially innocent or there's mitigating circumstances, I'm not terribly happy about what has happened. Point number 91. For example, on October 24th, the day after Baldwin met with Matt and I think it's Andy's son, Baldwin wrote to Hutchins in a text message, if you feel that any looming litigation makes it impractical for you to stay in touch with me, I understand. He went on to say, I am sure, as we discussed, that soon things will turn toward the business side of the situation. And then he said, and I know you will need to focus on that, and if that eclipses the spirit of our contact, I understand. Now, I don't quite know what he means by business side. Does he mean the business side of Rust, where you want Rust to continue, and so you must sign certain documents. Maybe it's a non-disclosure, maybe it is accept the insurance compensation or whatever. Or does he mean business side as symbolic for the legal processes taking over? I'm talking about specific to the Rust incident, not in terms of the Rust production. So I'm not quite sure what he means by the business side of the situation. But it is interesting that you have Baldwin, who is certainly facing looming litigation from other people, who's kind of saying, will you let me know, he's basically saying, will you let me know if litigation is something that you sort of thinking about? Or I don't know if he's really asking that question, but he's saying, if that does happen, I understand. And you almost think that what he's looking for is reassurance. He's looking for a response. He's looking for some kind of answer to what's not really stated as a question, but I guess is a question at that point. Remember, this was written 3 days later, Sunday, October 24th at 10:39 a.m. And so this was his response. I'm sure my legal advisors will say I should not speak with you. PR person already did. I think we can keep the business separate from any contact on a personal level. If it becomes a problem, I will let you know. I don't really see anything wrong with that. I think he's just saying that we should keep the channels open where we can speak simply to one another. And in terms of the other side of things, well, that's the other side of things. But he says, if that does come up, I will let you know. Now, I don't know whether that is going to be held against him, where he says, if it becomes a problem, I will let you know. Does he then let him know? Does he say, by the way, I've now decided to litigate, I'm now letting you know, right? I don't know if that's being kind of held as trying to undermine or examine or just point a finger at Matt's credibility in that respect, or sincerity in that respect. Then it says, this point number 92, Matt never once said to Baldwin that he doubted the veracity of Baldwin's telling of the events of October 21, 2021, which remained consistent from the first day the two of them spoke. So now it's coming out that apparently a version was given about what happened. And so I don't know what that version is. It's not really spelled out here. It's referred to after the fact retrospectively, which just seems a little bit bizarre. One does wonder what was said when something was said and how long it was discussed. But if this is true, point number 92 is true, then because it says it remained consistent from the first day, well, then one can potentially assume that what was said during the December 3rd interview and what was said in this particular statement that we're going through right now and what was said to Matt was the same thing. That I think is a matter of debate, because you would imagine that if what was said at the time and what was said on December 3rd was exactly the same, that we know that Matt was quite upset by what he heard on December 3rd. I mean, he said that he was surprised that Baldwin said that he wasn't responsible, or that he didn't feel responsible. One wonders, what did he say to Matt? Did he ever say, I feel so responsible, I feel so bad, or whatever? Did he say those words? In what way was it the same? In what way was it different? But it just would be interesting to know, what is the scale and scope of the version that he gave, when did he give it, and how that compares to the December 3rd statement. Now, what's also quite interesting from this is point number 93, which refers to Hutchins, Matt never once saying to Alec Baldwin that he thought Baldwin was responsible or culpable for his wife's death. And so one wonders, was he supposed to do that? Was he supposed to say, I blame you, it's your fault, whatever? And you have a kind of interesting intertextuality. It's not quite the same with the Laundrie family, who knew about certain things, and their lawyer basically said, you have the right to remain silent, but in a totally different scenario. I mean, I don't know whether you can say that Matt has an obligation, a legal obligation, to say, I think you're responsible. But anyway, I think what they're trying to do is show that Baldwin remains consistent from the first day, and they're trying to say Matt kind of changed his mind. I don't know what's so weird about that, because in true crime, often when you get more information, I'm talking about the true crime community, as you get more information, as there's more context, you may get a different feeling about something. You may get a different reality about something. And my personal feeling was I gave Alec Baldwin the benefit of the doubt until his December 3rd interview. So until then I thought, yeah, it was probably just an accident. It was probably just, whatever. But I basically thought, I actually felt very sorry for Alec Baldwin and also for what had happened. But then when I saw him on television, it just seemed to put a different color over everything, a different kind of sheen. There seemed to be something disingenuous about the interview. That's all I can say. Saying something like, someone is responsible, I don't know who it is, but I know it's not me. It may not be disingenuous, but it seems like it could be. And by that I just mean everyone else that has put forward these lawsuits seems to have a pretty fixed idea of who is to blame. And then you have the guy at the center of this who doesn't seem to know who is to blame. Although I do think he does point a few fingers in this particular filing. We'll get to that. Now we go to page 28 and point number 94. On November 3rd, this was a month prior to that interview, Baldwin asked Hutchins, is it best if I don't attempt to contact you for the time being? So one almost gets a sense that Baldwin is feeling a bit insecure but worried. Have you changed your mind? Are you having second thoughts? And it says here, although Matt did not respond directly to Baldwin's question, a week later on November 10th, he wrote to Baldwin, how are you doing? And later called Baldwin. I find that almost quite ridiculous. What they're saying in this point is, again, that Baldwin is, I guess, being supportive or whatever, but Baldwin's really fishing for some answers. Are we still on the same page, whatever. And so Baldwin, Matt doesn't actually respond to him, which gives you a sense that as time's going by, Matt's not terribly happy with the situation. And to his credit, he doesn't say everything's fine when maybe he's feeling things aren't fine. But anyway, he does say on November 10, how are you doing? And then they, I guess, have another conversation. This particular communication took place on Wednesday, November 3rd at 9:28 a.m. And the response came on Wednesday, a week later, November 10th, 1:09 p.m. Now we go to point number 95. On December 1st, following a missed call from Hutchins, Baldwin wrote to Hutchins, your attorney told me not to contact you. So what's up? So you're kind of getting a sense that Baldwin is doing quite a lot of the communication here. I don't know whether all the communications are being shown, but you're kind of getting the idea that Alec Baldwin is contacting Hutchins, and Hutchins is not really saying much, right? And Hutchins said to that, his response to that was, enjoy your time with your kids. I just wanted to check in with you about the interview. This is December 1st, and I kind of get the idea that the interview he's talking about is December 3rd. Maybe he wants to know what would be discussed there. And I think it's actually mentioned here, Hutchins was referring to an interview between Baldwin and ABC host George Stephanopoulos, which Baldwin had filmed on November 30th. Okay, there we go. And was set to air the next day, December 3rd. And then obviously it was reported in the media the day after that, December 2nd. It aired December 2nd. It was reported in the media the next day. Matt wrote, haven't seen the interview, but aware of it. He also wrote, but please just focus on them and we can talk sometime. So you kind of get the feeling that Hutchins is rebuffing Baldwin. He doesn't really want to talk to him. And Baldwin is also kind of saying, it seems like we are crossing swords now. Can you confirm that? He says, your attorney told me not to contact you. What's up? Right? And one also wonders, did Baldwin want to contact him prior to the interview for whatever reason? Can you make a statement on the show, or I don't know, whatever it was. So it is quite interesting. There's a little bit of consternation around this interview, right? But what we really want to know is, after Matt saw the interview, what happened from that? And I think it's also quite interesting. He says, I haven't seen the interview, but I'm aware of it. One wonders, how is he aware of it? Did family members see it and were they upset? Was he aware of it in a positive way or a negative way? Or what do you think? And also, what do you think the public's response in general to it was? You don't even have to be a family member to feel that certain things came across in a certain way. Well, how much more so would these things not have come across if you were the person closest to Helena, listening to what happened to her? Now we go to page 29, and it's point number 97. Sensitive about his contact with Hutchins and not wanting to overstep, Baldwin wrote, make sure you tell your lawyer that you reached out to me and not vice versa. Matt responded, of course, and he said, you can always text me if you have something on your mind. Now, consider this text. Make sure you tell your lawyer that you reached out to me and not vice versa. And if we go back to point number 76, it is the morning of October 22, the day following Helena's death. Baldwin contacted Matt via text message, reaching out to inquire if they may speak. So actually, the person who reached out first was Alec Baldwin. So Baldwin does seem to be trying to stress that Hutchins reached out to him, and bear in mind what was said at the Boulder Film Festival, people are after him for his money, right? Whereas what seems to be coming across here in a funny way is that Baldwin is reaching out quite a few times to Hutchins, and Hutchins is saying, well, focus on your family, I'll get back to you. And Baldwin is aware that even Hutchins' attorney has said, don't contact him, kind of thing. Anyway, next point is number 97. Sensitive about his contact with Matt and not wanting to overstep, Baldwin wrote, make sure you tell your lawyer. Number 98, Baldwin responded, your lawyer sent a variant of a cease and desist to me and told me not to contact you, so there's that. Hutchins says, I think that's just usual legal formalities. That does seem a little bit interesting, in terms of this question of who's playing who. That cease and desist, one wonders, was it just legal formalities, or are the hooks out in terms of what has just happened after this December 2nd, December 3rd interview? Number 99, Baldwin and Hutchins exchanged several additional text messages that day, with Baldwin providing information on his interview airing on ABC the next day and inquiring about Hutchins' son, and Hutchins providing updates on his son's well-being. What's quite interesting is, despite them saying there were several additional text messages, you don't actually see them. When he says providing information on his interview airing the next day, one wonders, does he provide any information about what he said during the interview, which is just giving the time of it. Point number 100. On December 17, over 2 weeks after Baldwin's interview with Stephanopoulos, Baldwin sent a text message to Hutchins in light of the upcoming holidays, writing, in spite of the anguish of all this, I'm wishing you and your son a happy holiday. So you kind of get the sense that there was a period of 2 weeks of silence, and that Baldwin again breaks that silence, trying to keep things rolling along, trying to keep what he feels is hopefully a positive relationship rolling along. Now, bear in mind, he's already aware about the cease and desist letter, and is aware of don't contact my client, and here he is contacting him. So I think the thing that one's got to bear in mind is, didn't Baldwin also watch what he said? Didn't Baldwin also watch the December 3rd interview and wonder what Hutchins thought about it? And is he possibly feeling concerned about what Alina's husband is thinking about it, what he said? And so this particular response is kind of held up as a big deal in this particular legal filing, where 2 weeks after the statement that was made on that ABC interview, he says, Matt Hutchins says, I genuinely hope you and the whole family can get together and have moments of fun, love, and togetherness, and that it is a healing time for everyone. And one wonders, in terms of that, is that a sarcastic message? It seems genuine, but it's certainly not really giving any clue about what he's really feeling. And I think this is once again a little bit of a snip saying that, isn't Matt being quite inconsistent, because he doesn't say anything negative? And, surely this was his opportunity. Baldwin contacts him after the interview. Well, if he's seen it, well, now is his chance to say something, and obviously he doesn't. And so what is happening is he's keeping his cards close to his chest, isn't he? And so one's got to ask, is this a case that it's only Matt keeping his cards close to his chest, or is Alec Baldwin doing the same thing, just in a different way? What do you think? Because it's only just come to light now that all along Baldwin has been hoping to have a settlement with Matt so that the production can continue, right? That is certainly an incentive to make sure that all sort of ruffled feathers are smoothed over. Okay, well, do you need this? Do you need that? Do you need that? Okay, great. Can we carry on with the movie sort of scenario? So what is quite interesting is that, in a weird way, there's a sort of a sense of shifting a different kind of responsibility, shifting a different kind of onus onto Matt now, because it's point number 101. Baldwin believed that Matt wished to maintain a positive and mutually supportive relationship with him and those involved in Rust's production. And so it's like Matt is now responsible for the production going forward, and he's leading Baldwin to believe that it is going forward, except, well, it's not, because there is litigation that's coming up. And so one wonders, could you even have a counter-suit going on here? Now, what I find just quite interesting is I've watched quite a lot of Baldwin's statements on Instagram, and he doesn't really mention Alina's name much, even when he's talking about her. And then he says expressly, this is point 101, to honor Alina's legacy and to assist Hutchins and their son, Baldwin and Baldwin alone took the lead on behalf of the Rust producers in designing a proposed settlement to compensate Hutchins and his son for the irreplaceable loss of their wife and daughter. Now, this proposed settlement, I think, was to come out of the insurance. So it's not as though that he's proposing a settlement out of his own pocket, so to speak. That's how I understand this. The other thing that I think is quite significant is it sort of makes Alec Baldwin to be the hero here, that he's taking the lead, trying to get a settlement going. But the reality is that he's also taking the lead in trying to get his production back on the road. Does that make sense? 102, as early as November 3rd, 2021, this is a month before that interview, Baldwin was in touch with the Rust producers, coordinating the effort to get the group together to begin discussions of settlement. I think what that also may be is that Baldwin may have been in touch with this idea of, we want to make sure we can salvage this production, right? Interestingly, point 103, but the other producers of Rust who hired the crew did not take any substantial part in creating the proposed settlement or communicating the details to Matt Hutchins. One wonders, did they just elect not to do so, or were they told not to do so? Were they told by somebody, I'll handle it? Now, 104, although Baldwin believed that the business side of the production, there's that word again, business side of the production, particularly Ryan Smith, should be conducting these settlement discussions, Smith and his team did not return Baldwin's phone calls and chose to do nothing. Again, this makes it seem like Alec Baldwin is the hero here. He's really... anyway, Baldwin took the lead out of his respect for Hutchins and his son and a genuine desire to provide them redress for their loss. Do you think that genuine desire to provide redress was expressed during that December 2nd interview? So yeah, we have some clarity. Point number 105. The proposed settlement for Hutchins included a component of insurance proceeds. In addition, Baldwin made an exhaustive effort to contact the Rust cast in the hope of acquiring their support to finish the film. So at the same time that Baldwin seems to be sort of sorting out the insurance side, he's also trying to get the Rust. That is the part that's really needs to be emphasized here. That simultaneously to that effort of redress, Baldwin is also trying to get his show back on the road. Point 108 refers to Matt saying that the proposed settlement sounded quote-unquote interesting. He said he didn't accept or reject the settlement, and he said he would need to think over additional details. Again, this question, who do you think was playing who in this scenario? Then there was a second phone call, so you get this idea that they're reaching out to him, and then Matt didn't sound very open-minded, apparently. And then, of course, all of this came to a head on February 14, Valentine's Day 2022. This is point 109. Alex sent a text message telling Matt Hutchins that he heard that Hutchins' attorney intended to hold a press conference the next day. That was Brian Panish. Baldwin expressed his concern that the proposed settlement would be imperiled by the press conference, meaning that the insurance settlement would be imperiled, and I think he was also concerned that this could lead to a problem trying to complete his film. So those were his concerns at that point. And so I think Baldwin was concerned that if anyone in Hutchins's complaint or in his press conference, if Hutchins's lawyer attacked a person involved with Rust, someone who was essential to the completion of the film, that could jeopardize the completion of the film. And so you can see that this was perhaps uppermost in the mind of Alec Baldwin, is trying to get his film finished. So I'm not going to take it further than that. There is quite a lot more to deal with in this statement. 37 pages. We've only dealt with a couple of them. But I think we're in a better position now to ask and answer that question. Who was playing who? And I think one's also got to think about it in a different way. Do you think it would have been proper? Do you think it would have been realistic for, let's say you were dealing, I don't want to use names here, but let's say you've got two people. Let's say it's Fred and John. Do you think John, let's say Fred is the person who is wanting to make the movie. Do you think John should be completely honest at all times with exactly what he thinks about everything? Do you think Fred has been honest the whole time? So in other words, is it realistic to expect Fred and John both to be completely honest with one another? Is it realistic to think one of them would be completely honest with one another? And if one of them hasn't been completely honest with one another, do you think the other should be honest nevertheless? What do you think about that? So we still have much to get through in terms of this 37-page document, so look out for further episodes and updates from this channel. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.